And then this is a German flag that was taken down, Nazi flag taken down right after D-Day by a British Army captain. And I bought this from him in 1989 in England. And it has the invasion of France, June 1944, and it shows the 21st Army Group under which the Canadian forces fought. That was Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery. And then you have the different towns that the 21st Army Group liberated throughout Europe. You've got France, Belgium, and Germany, and Holland. So it's difficult, as I said, to have a Nazi flag, but it is history, and it does signify the defeat of Nazi Germany. This is a Japanese flag. Every Japanese soldier had one of these banzai flags. These two are Japanese, as I said before, from World War II, and this is a Japanese banzai sword. They all carried these, and they used them. It was a throwback to the samurai, and they were famous for cutting the heads off prisoners and stabbing them. They loved to use their swords. It was very symbolic and very deadly. These are bayonets here. This is German. This is a World War I German bayonet. Okay, this is what you would have come up against if you were in the trenches. This is what the British and Canadian forces used in World War I. That was a bayonet that would go on the end of the rifle, trench warfare. Up here, if you can see up here, these are bayonets. You can always tell things that are French because they look curly and certain design to them. This is what the French used in World War I and before, in the late 1800s right through World War I. And this also is French up here on top. This would be German, Prussian in the 1880s, 1870s, 1880s, one of their swords. This is what the Canadian forces and British forces used in World War II. This was the bayonet. You can see it's just really like a nail. And that's, you know, statistically the number of soldiers that were killed by bayonet or wounded was insignificant. It was very, very tiny. But there was a fear factor with the bayonet. As I said before, this is what they would have used in the 1800s. And it's got three sides to it, so your wound, one side would never heal if you lived through the stabbing. This is Hitler Youth. All the little boys were given these in Germany. And my dad was at D-Day, and matter of fact, they captured a lot of Hitler Youth. That's who the British and Canadians fought against at D-Day. And they were boys, 14, 15, 16. And you would have thought that they were just boys, but they were radical. They were super, super radical. And they wouldn't take water if they were wounded. They would try to kill you any way they could after they were captured. And my dad said they captured about 15 of them, and to embarrass them, they cut their pants off. So they were to show them they're just little kids. They let them go. And the sergeant came along and found that out, and they all got hell, big time. And they had to go and try to find these guys again because they were very, very vicious. They were more vicious than the older men, Hitler Youth, because they were so brainwashed right from when they were 10 years old or before. Shows you we got slaughtered at the Dieppe raid in World War II, and this is just when the Americans are ready to invade Japan in September of 1945. The East Germans, the Communists, war. This is an American helmet from World War II, and this is an American helmet from World War II. This is a Croatian from World War II and after, and this is East German, Communist, East German, Soviet Union, when there was a Soviet Union. That's what they wore. And this is what they wore in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, when the Bolsheviks, the Soviets, revolted, and this is what they wore. They don't look very, by our standards, this is pretty goofy looking, but that's what they wore. Mm-hmm. And they had flaps here to help keep their ears warm. And this is a book from a guy who lived in the Soviet Union, and I don't know if this is the different meetings that he went to, the communist meetings, but this was a record of something.
That's really cool.
These are some models here. This is a German Panzer tank. And I mentioned earlier how they didn't have sloped armor. So you see how everything's up and down? So this would take a full brunt of a shot, you know. Now, the best tank in World War II was the Russian tank, the T-34. And you see it has sloped armor. It's sloped on the turret, it's sloped here. And this tank would go about 45, 50 miles an hour. And it had a Hotchkiss suspension system, which the Americans invented in the 1930s, and then they discarded it. They didn't use it. They relearned a lesson afterwards, but the Germans and the Russians copied it. And then now, as the war progresses, you see that you have sloped armor on this German tank here, but you see it doesn't have a pivoting turret. So you had to move the whole tank in order to move the gun. It would go up and down, but it wouldn't go sideways. But they're beginning to put sloped armor on their tanks. This is from a Royal Canadian Air Force base in 1943 during World War II in Alberta. It's all marked on the back side. This is a flyer. All the flyers had silk maps when they bombed Germany and Japan. And why would they use silk? Because paper crinkles and makes noise. So if they're shot down and looking for a direction, you know, somebody could hear that. So they made all their maps out of silk so they could quietly go through what they were doing. And again, these are models of a lot of the fighters. You've heard a lot about the Mosquito Bomber. This is all made of wood. This was one of the fastest planes in World War II. And this is the dive bomber that the Nazis used. It had a big siren right here in the front, so you'd hear it screaming at you as it was coming in. So it would terrify the hell out of you. And this is a Henkel 111. This is what the Germans used in the Blitz, the Battle of the Blitz, the Battle of Britain, to bomb Britain. And then this is a P-38 Lightning. This would go well over 400 miles an hour. So when the war started, the Americans had almost nothing. They came into the war in 1941. By 1945, they had produced more airplanes than all the other combatants combined. And not only the same number, they had an infinite variety of airplanes. And their planes were, but this is a Japanese Zero. They would shoot these out of the sky. When the war started, these were very fast and nimble, and you couldn't fight this thing. It would shoot you down. But when the as the war progressed, you know, we were into survivability where the Japanese weren't. They didn't care if they lost the pilots and things like that as much as we did. So they didn't have bladders in their gas tanks. A bladder is just a rubber coating on the inside, so if you got hit by a bullet, it would open up and then seal again, so it wouldn't leak out and cause a fire. So any kind of a shot on one of these would knock it down. Where these planes here could be hit, especially this Thunderbolt, this plane right here, you could hit this thing all day long, and it wouldn't go down because it was made not to go down easily. This is a Soviet Union fighter, the Stormovik. They made 38,000 of these during World War II. These were tank busters, and they had 2-inch armor plating. So the Soviets, they cared, and you could hardly shoot one of these things down. And if it got after you, you were really in trouble because you couldn't knock it down. Whereas in the Japanese, you know, they were into lightweight. It's like they build their homes out of bamboo and paper. Mm-hmm. That's how they built their planes, you know. They looked for speed and that kind of stuff. But it didn't work when they really got tough. And the Spitfire and the P-40, the Hellcat, I mean, the variety of airplanes was amazing. This is the F-4 Phantom jet that was used in Vietnam. And up here you have an autographed picture of Chuck Yeager, who broke the sound barrier. He was at an air show about 3 years ago in Detroit, and I got that from him. And this was the German ace. He was the #2 ace in the Nazi Air Force, Gunther Rall, and he had 275 kills. And he was there with Chuck Yeager, so you know, old warriors.